Hi, I'm Pratim Ranjan Bose, and you are watching Podcast with Pratim, presented by Iravati Research and Communication Center, or IRCC. In this episode, we will discuss Myanmar. I have with me Captain Alok Bansal. He is Executive Director of South Asian Institute for Strategic Affairs, SAISA, under the eminent think tank India Foundation. Captain Malik is considered one of the finest experts on the region. Thank you, sir, for joining the show.
Thank you so much.
So let me start with an overall view on Myanmar before we descend to Arakan, which is dominating the newspapers now. Myanmar started its journey to stability in 2010, around 2008-10. And in 12, I think they had a democratic government. The beginning was with problems like Kachin army that did not join the peace process. The democratic constitution was drafted in a way that military holds the veto power. They had 25% seats in the parliament and holds crucial ministries like home affairs, defense, etc. The country was growing very fast when the 2021 coup took place. And since then, Myanmar army consistently lost grounds, particularly over the peripheral regions, which were always in trouble. There were incidents earlier this year when Myanmar army took shelter in India to survive attacks from rebels. That was in Mizoram. Kachin in north and Shan in the west are out of bounds of Myanmar army. Now Rakhine has gone. There are reports of disturbance in Mandalay area as well. So, and meanwhile, economic distress is at its peak. Chat is devalued substantially over last few years. Sir, how long can the military government hold? How much of Myanmar will be left? Is this country going to splinter? Over to you, sir.
See, firstly, I think when we talk of history, I think we need to really go far back. I think you started from 2010, but I think it's important that Myanmar's evolution, independence, in fact, before its independence, General Aung San had given certain assurances to ethnic minorities that if they wish, they could secede after a certain period of time. Of course, which was not adhered to by his successors, but more significantly, even the limited autonomy which was given to these states or different ethnicities was also actually taken away by subsequent regimes which were military dominated. There was actually a time when Communist Party of Burma, which and under its umbrella, a large number of ethnic organizations controlled virtually 1/3 of Burma or Myanmar as we call it today. So from that level, things had improved. Military managed to consolidate its position, managed to win over some of the ethnic armies, negotiated with it. But the result was Myanmar, which in 40s was considered amongst the richest states in Asia because of its vast natural resources, had reached a stage where it became one of the poorest countries in Asia. So obviously, they realized that this policy of isolation, which Nevin and his successors had followed, could not be pursued. And obviously, they started opening up. Now, when you open up, technology moves in, and along with technology moves in new ideas. And these ideas forced regime to come to some sort of an accommodation as far as some sort of a democratic norms were expected. And that's what we saw. The initial attempt in 1999 failed because despite electoral victory, NLD was not handed over power. Now, this time, of course, the democratic transition took place. Eventually, NLD government came to power. And in the next election, again, it came to power. And it is then the military acted. Now, unlike the previous coups or previous military regimes, there is a difference this time. Firstly, we need to understand that technology has permeated Myanmar in a big way. Those few years when the Myanmar society was open, huge foreign direct investment came in, and that's why the Myanmar was growing phenomenally, exponentially. And that has exposed population to outside ideas. Also, with technology, it's possible to reach individuals without having to use public broadcast systems or public media. Now, social media allows various organizations to reach individuals without having to depend on government services. And that's why we find that the insurgency this time is far more severe. More importantly, the way the government was toppled, the urban youth, which has always been supportive of insurgency, has also come out in a big way. What is even more significant is that for the first time, Tatmadaw is seeing desertions. The people are deserting it to join the opposition. The Bamar support for the government is not absolute. And as a result, what we are seeing is that the government's grit over areas is reducing. Now, the problem is the opposition, while it may have support, it has a lot of people with it and is ruling the countryside. The Tatmadaw still has certain advantages militarily. That is, it has heavy artillery, which of course the opposition also has managed to get. But they have, as of now, the sole monopoly on air power, that air force, and they have used it without any hesitation. There have been numerous cases where aerial bombing has been resorted to on towns which were held by the opposition forces, and they have been bombed. So that in general is the situation that exists as of now. Now, the NLD-led democratic government, NUG, provides them a veneer of respectability because these ethnic armies have existed for decades. But what now you have with NUG, they get a veneer of respectability, and especially the Western world, which has been extremely supportive of the democratic movements, is supportive of this particular government, and they are probably getting a lot of funds and support, besides, of course, moral support. And that's actually helping them. And we now already see that in many states, most of the places are under control. In fact, in Kachin state, you were talking about since July, there is no internet. You cannot use internet at private places. Now, of course, in Michina and all, you can go to a public place and use an internet. But you cannot use internet even today from home. So it's almost 5 months and this is happening. So that's what I was trying to say. The government's measures have been extremely draconian, and it is having an impact.
Okay. So, before we come to Arakan, just a quick question. What is the status in Sagaing and Chin? Chin joined the peace process. I remember 2015-17, I had been visiting that area, and particularly Mizoram, Manipur, and crossed over, the open border system. Had been to Myanmar also, but they were coming back. Things were coming back to normalcy, a lot of movements. And what is the status now? Because these are directly bordering Mizoram and Manipur.
See, factually speaking, when the peace process was signed, a lot of groups had joined them. Almost, I think, 15 were there which had joined, and in fact, only 2 or 3 were left out. But after the coup, I think most of the ethnic armed organizations have realized that getting any sort of autonomy or getting any of their aspirations met under a purely military regime is going to be difficult, because it is never going to respect the people's aspirations or people's views. So more or less, most of them have aligned themselves with the NUG. No, but I wouldn't say that everybody is aligned. There are still groups, vigilante groups, which are with the government and with Tatmadaw, and in many states they are fighting. As far as Chin state and Sagaing state is concerned, large tracts have been captured by the opposition, but most of the urban centers are still under the government control. And what is another important facet which we need to understand is that this time the insurgency is also in the heartland. You have conflict taking place around near Mandle in Mandle province, Magwe province. There are huge insurgencies going on the countryside. So it is not as if only the ethnic minorities have captured things and they have gone. And what has happened even more is, what is more interesting is that where NUG and government forces are fighting, they're also resorting to psychological operations, where NUG is trying to do a loudspeaker blast, trying to tell the soldiers to defect, and why they're serving the government is actually flawed, and all those things. So all these things are having an impact. As of now, the only big problem which I feel at the moment with the opposition is, firstly, militarily, they don't have the air power, air support. So army has a free hand. If they would have had some air force that could have countered army, then probably the government would have fallen in no time. The second bigger problem which would come is that these ethnic armed organizations have come together under the NUG umbrella, but they have again conflicting claims. They have territorial disputes. Uh, it is a different thing that right now one army is operating from somebody else's terrain, because as we are seeing, as of now, you are finding that ethnic armed organizations are operating in from entirely alien organized places also, because that sort of collaboration is existing. But uh, in times to come, this could become a problem once they start attaining victory or they are close to victory, because then there will be problem of, is this my territory or is this your territory? So those issues will have to be resolved. So if NUG actually wants to have a realistic go, they must come out with a clear cut policies that we will have a decentralized government. What will be the policies? Because please understand, even the previous regime, when the NLD was ruling, the provinces or states, both in regions and state, in Myanmar's case, they have two different things. They did not really have genuine autonomy. Very often, the chief ministers were appointed from Nepido rather than having support from the local legislature. So, that sort of an autonomy which you wanted to give to an ethnic minority was not available. So, there were, of course, discontentment. And I think that's what we are seeing today, which has actually helped NUG to emerge as a very, very big force.
Sir, back in the 80s and 90s, or you can tell better when, I think it was during 80s and 90s, particularly when China grabbed a lot of assets, taking advantage of Myanmar's situation. They were isolated and they were giving up assets for many things, and making army ruler. Myanmar army was making money. That's another part. Now, one issue is whether during this instability, China will gain control over geographies. They had huge control over Kachin, Chin, Rakhine. They have port and they have huge interests there, submarines and etc. The more worrying part is that there has been huge play of the Western powers, which we can see. You know it better maybe from inside, but I can see the activities on the diplomatic side. So, and there were reports of, you said, about availability of resources. There were even some newspaper reports about arms. So, I mean, are we creating a huge, is there any end to it, or it is going to be another kind of Syria situation where they will keep fighting for too long?
See, firstly, when you said 70s, 80s China grabbed thing, we need to understand that there was a time when Myanmar was completely isolated. And China was the only country with which it was communicating. So all the economic activities, they came under the purview of China. In fact, in 1999, when India made a flip, from our support to NLD, which had not been handed over power, we started engaging with the military government. One of the reasons why Myanmar wanted to engage with India was that an average citizen in Myanmar is not very happy with Chinese influence. Let's be very clear. Chinese are not looked up to. There is a fear. And as a result, they felt that in India, they could find a balancing power to balance Chinese influence. Of course, when they opened up, the Western countries came in a big way, especially Japan invested huge amounts to do that. Now, what happened initially, if you look at it, the Chinese were playing both sides. They were supporting the Kokangs, who are ethnic Chinese also. They were also with the Tatmadaw. But of late, China has found it very difficult to manage this instability. As I said, the communist state doesn't really like disorder. They believe in too much of an order. Any disorder is a problematic thing for them. And
We saw how they failed during COVID.
so that's what I'm trying to say. So for that order, they insisted. Now they are trying to tell the ethnic organizations that they should maintain order, and and this has actually created a reactions from the opposition, and they have tilted towards the government now. So that is one field where it is, and the Western world is of course steadfastly behind NUG because they want this government to go. So that is the situation as it exists. I don't think so. China will be in a position to grab uh, more assets because already ethnic Chinese, according to one report, when I had gone there, was told that almost one third of property in Mandalay is owned by Chinese. That's what people were saying. In fact, people were saying even more. Some of them under shadow, fictitious names, etc., have grabbed properties. But what happens is whenever somebody does this, there is also a reaction. So an average citizen of Myanmar, there is a reaction against this. So that continues. So they're trying to figure out how they can do it. So as of now, I don't think so. China will definitely try. And if Tatmadaw succeeds completely, well, then yes, then they may probably gain some more economic assets. Though even Tatmadaw would not want Chinese to have greater stake. But on the other hand, the way it appears as of now, it doesn't look that Tatmadaw can have an easy victory. So what they are trying to do is now they are trying to negotiate also. As you saw, some of the ethnic armed organizations have entered into negotiations with them, and their probably aim is to negotiate with some so that the rest can be weakened and then can be pursued. So they know that NUG, while it has an international respectability and provides a veneer of modicum of stability or a governance or constitutional validity, doesn't really have the military power. The military power is primarily wielded by ethnic armed organizations who have the real power. And NUG has managed to bring them all together. So that factor we need to understand. And I think that's why uh, I personally feel now the international community also needs to engage actively with NUG because especially for India, eh, virtually our entire bordering areas are now controlled by NUG, barring a small strips here and there. But most of Kachin state is virtually entirely with opposition. If you leave Michina and some of the road links, even in Sagayan, close to our area, we have a problem. Chin state was already there. Rakhine state, though, now it's almost crumbling. The government hold is virtually crumbling. So we have a very strong position of the opposition. I think it may be better to engage with opposition at this stage because China is engaging with the Tatmadaw and it's trying to support the regime in Naypyidaw. So maybe if we start engaging effectively with opposition, we might have a greater leverage with the opposition and the forces which are in any case controlling territories close to our borders.
So the West also wants India to engage with rebels. That is what I picked up over the last 6, 7 months. Uh, so you are saying, and we also saw India recently invited some rebel groups, and the some ice breaking has been going on. Do we have much success?
Well, I'm not part of the government. Let me make it very clear. So I'm not really privy. I know one of the think tanks here, Indian Council of World Affairs, which is affiliated with Ministry of External Affairs, had invited certain Myanmarese group here. Uh, what was the outcome? Think tanks, of course, look at all opportunities. And as a think tanker, I can say that given a chance, I would also like to engage with opposition as well as government both. I actually meet the ambassador also, I meet the diplomats also, and I would like to engage with the government also, whoever it is. We would definitely like to engage. But the problem which I feel, and again, see, in 1999, we thought that the support was with the NLD. So we initially supported the NLD. Then we realized that Tatmadaw was not going anywhere, and we switched sides and again started supporting the regime. But unlike 99, this time it doesn't seem that Tatmadaw will be able to establish its writ without taking the opposition into some sort of a negotiated settlement. They'll have to yield something. It cannot be a brute military victory, which they were hoping to, which I don't think so is feasible now.
Why it is this might bring in some kind of sanity, you're right, that way. But then other issues are definitely to be considered. Sir, now straight to Arakan. It has been taken over by, in fact, one small interjection before that. I see a very interesting design, whether it is Bangladesh, whether it is Syria, and whether it is Arakan. A very quick sweep and the establishment is gone. Is this kind of a new regime change, quote unquote, formula?
See, what we saw in Bangladesh and Syria was, to my mind, quite similar. You saw established
But we
regime
also
crumble.
saw that in Afghanistan.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. These three Western machinations were seen very clearly, where Western agenda actually toppled established secular regimes to usher in closeted Islamists or closeted radical elements to bring them to power.
But in Afghanistan, they became the victim of it.
See, they will become a victim everywhere. You take, mark my words, take a few years, they'll, even in Bangladesh and Syria, if the regime sustains, they will become victim, because these are nothing but hardcore jihadi terrorists who have actually come to power. As far as Syria is concerned, Bangladesh, fortunately, the nationalists are still fighting. There is a fighting chance that we may be able to redeem the situation. But the fact is, the regime is actually supported by Jamaat, Harkat, all these people, and their elements are everywhere. They are slowly capturing all organs of the government. Fortunately, army is still a divided, ideologically divided army, but still maintaining a little distance. So you don't know. But there is no doubt that these three states crumbled with huge support from the Western powers. I don't think so. It would be prudent to put it in the same genre as far as Rakhine state is concerned, because the war has been going on for a very, very long time. Let's be very clear. Arakan army has been active. In fact, the regime had been holding on to a few urban spots for a very long time. Of course, in that area, the another interesting development is the third force, which is the Rohingyas, which have a position, and so that's the issue which is. And from our point of view, Rakhine State is very, very important, because our Kaladan multimodal project, etc., all transit through this, and actually all our future planning is dependent to a very great extent on these communication projects, which we were hoping will succeed and emerge as very, very successful tools of cooperation between the two countries.
Sir, you have hit the nail. Rakhine State is very important to us from the perspective of Rohingya, and some reports say there are 11 Rohingya rebel groups. And there have been people had been pushed from this side, or very armed militants went in and they took care of certain things over there, etc., etc. So how do you see, and these groups are currently controlling a couple of dots in the Rakhine map. So how do you see this situation evolving? If can it and if it remains disturbed, it will be a source of arms and a lot of other things which will finally affect us.
See, there is no doubt that some of the Rohingya groups are very closely aligned with jihadi organizations. They have been infiltrated with jihadi ideologies. So we have to tackle them. At the same time, we need to understand that the vast majority of Rohingyas are actually victims. And to that extent, NUG has tried to reach some sort of a accommodation with Rohingyas. They have tried to include some of them into their armed forces. And I'm sure NUG, especially because Arakan army is not very fond of Rohingyas, let's be very clear about it. It's at the pressure of NUG that some sort of an accommodation has taken place, would probably find some way. As far as these jihadi elements are concerned, I think we will have to collaborate with the Arakan army to actually eliminate these jihadist dots which exist on the map, because these people who are influenced by Al Qaeda or Islamic State ideology will prove to be a very, very major source of threat to Indian security if they are allowed to thrive and prosper. Of course, this is all dependent on what happens in Bangladesh, because if huge Bangladesh becomes an Al Qaeda Islamic State supported hub, then I think these dots would probably become immaterial as far as our security is concerned. We will have a bigger security threat next door. So, all those things we'll have to take into account.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for coming here and giving your time on a busy day.
Thank you so much.